Talks, where we discuss all aspects of IT automation, share our experience. Welcome to Covarium Talks, where we discuss all aspects of IT automation, share our experience, and answer your questions.
Today on Covarium Talks, we're going to discuss automating employee onboarding and offboarding processes. Today on Covarium Talks, we're going to discuss automating employee onboarding and offboarding processes. It could be one of the most employee onboarding is one of the directly impacts the new hires' first experience, as well as how it could be one of the most productive and have the ability to impact the new hires' first experience. Yet for many businesses, onboarding remains a highly manual process involving multiple teams. Yet for many businesses, onboarding remains a highly manual process. Organizations frequently ask us whether onboarding of employees can be automated. Organizations frequently ask us whether onboarding of employees can be automated. The answer is yes, and the benefit minimizes errors, improves security, automating allows support teams to focus on higher value work, minimizes errors, repetitive administrative, and allows support teams to focus on higher value podcast series instead of the repetitive administrative of automating the Today we're going to begin our latest podcast series by discussing the fundamentals. I have extensive experience in a wide range of IT areas, which gives me a unique perspective when analyzing situations. I have extensive experience in a wide range of IT areas, which helps me seek answers to difficult out-of-the-box questions. I tend to over-analyze network of experts. It helps me seek answers to difficult out-of-the-box questions. While collaborating with a wide also has extensive experience in a broad range of IT areas with a high concentration in IT automation. He also has extensive experience in a broad range of IT areas automation can be used to improve your employee onboarding, and I'm looking forward to exploring how automation can be used to improve your employee onboarding.
Thank you for joining me today. It's been a while since we got to catch up, so I'm interested to hear what we can help people understand about automation processes and onboarding, and what we can help people understand about what we can do to make it easier for them. Of onboarding and kind of the painful points, and what we can do to make it easier.
Because it is one of the most painful tasks that most companies have with you. Whenever it is one of the most painful tasks automation to companies ETs have, and I would say 90% of automation that is the first use case. Can we automate our onboarding? I would say 90% of all customers processes. That is the first use case they want. Can we automate our poorly delivered and offboarding processes? Big security, because there are security issues poorly delivered and big security. A number of different implementations with offboarding. I worked with a US media outlet implementations for customers. They had about 6,000 US media outlet. Their turnover was about 15 to 20%. They had about 6,000 full-time employees, but their turnover was about 15 to 20%. Employee onboarding employees a year took about 2 weeks.
Wow.
To do their employee onboarding process took about 2 weeks. Yep. To do manually. We got that down to about 3 hours.
That's incredible. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we got that down to about placing 3 hours. A standard laptop shipped to the main manager. Yeah, and that included placing an order and getting a standard laptop shipped to the
imaging it and
manager.
All kinds of things too, as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
So they have the correct apps for means imaging it and all kinds of things too, as well, right?
Yes. So they have
the correct apps for whatever their
based on the role that we're employing. Yes, absolutely. So they put it into the standard OS to and then deploy the necessary apps and permissions for that new machine. Put it into the right groups to deploy the necessary apps and system permissions for that new machine.
What is the point where they actually started the process? Where did they decide to trigger it from? What is the point where they actually started the process? Where did they decide to trigger it from?
Where they started from was that so a HR request where they started from was so human resources personnel department would a HR submit request into IT. So when they thought somebody's going to be department would hired submit request into and that was a manual request when they thought somebody's going to be IT team then had to pick that hired and that was a manual information from the IT team then had the information that was provided by the HR team typically go back and validate from the list that was data the information that was provided by the HR team typically go back and validate is the person who submitted because data was missing the data was there. Manual request relies on how good is the person who submitted the request to go through that process. So they start off with a very manual integration approach, then go through that process. So they start off with a very manual automating integration fulfillment, and what we action with what it was automating how we're going to build it, and then we tied it in directly into the HR system, how we're going to build it, and then the tool that they were using, we tied it in directly into the HR system, would output a CSV file using every day of all of the would output employee CSV file every day, and of all of what we do is import that CSV statuses to a database table. All we do is import that CSV you file. You could go based on if there was a database table in column, and then you could go based on if there was that indicated the employee was successfully going on board, was going to be hired. That indicated and the employee was successfully going on board, was going to be hired. That meant that we had, and at that point, that was the trigger for full name. Used to be created, and that meant that we had name if they wanted one, full name, line manager, preferred location, name if they wanted job role, job title, line manager, all that information, location populated. So we then could go job through role and job title, take that and go off, and all of that basically that all populated. So we then could go through and the whole take automated user basically onboarding that process. Trigger.
And then I would imagine that can still be used for people that change roles within the company. And then I would imagine that can still be used for people that change roles within the company.
In the case of that customer,
or eventually the offboarding process when they leave.
The same CSV file in the case of that customer, but if somebody had data in I think it was the like the 16th column file got generated, but if somebody had data that indicated that they were being like the 16th column leaving, and it had and then the next that indicated that they were being. So we were able to then take that as and it had and then the next column was the leaving date. Automatically, so we were able to then take that as process to go being offboarded. On this day, we know we need to go and do automatically trigger the offboarding process to go. If on this day, we know we need to go and litigation hold these things. But before that, Microsoft 365, so the email litigation hold protected in Microsoft 365, so the emails that are in their system are protected. You could go and we would went in OneDrive part of that process to go and change. You could go and permissions went in as part of that process to go and change CRM system. So permissions offboarding user becomes a read-only access to their CRM system. Their CRM, that was part of the process. An offboarding user becomes a read-only access to their CSM, their CRM. That was part of their process. Well, in fact, so what we did with their process was they went because people, some people have been around for quite a while, and we don't know what we did with their process. All of the systems they may have access to. Some people have been around for quite a while, and we don't know. They've got access to everything. All of the systems they may have access to everywhere. So we would go through and see they've got access to everything, and go and find. If, for example, you were leaving the business, so we would go through and see, you have CRM access. So you were leaving the business, change to a read-only. Role. You have CRM access, so you somebody change to a read-only. Say a developer was leaving, whereas they wouldn't have any access to CRM, but you go through and see. No, don't exist. Developer was leaving. They wouldn't have any access to CRM, but you go through and see. You would then go and do things in the development don't exist. Therefore, we don't need to do any access on the CRM systems. But you would then go and do blocking their ability to export or copy.
I remember
blocking their ability to export or copy.
Pretty major. I remember people would recognize enterprise type level groups, major, and names one of the things that we always found handy was 9 times out of 10, and if somebody used to do something handy was 9 times out of 10 didn't necessarily get removed when they moved to a different role. To do something, so if you got stuck and you needed something done that they used to do, you could still go to them and say, "Hey, can you go do this for me?" So if you got stuck and you needed something done that they used to do, you could still go to them and say, "Hey, can you go do this for me?" And you're saying. And to me, I always saw that as somewhat of a red flag. Should they be doing it? And you know, and who's monitoring? It's nice that they can do it, but should they be doing it? You know, and who's monitoring and auditing that in some level? Detail.
In a large part of the
this would be able to address that in some level.
When we start to talk to customers in a large part of employee onboarding is. Requests when we start to talk to customers about employee onboarding is job roles. And allocate their IT resources only to the based job roles, the job role they're getting, their IT resources, and then when they change roles, only to the take away based on the job role they're getting. Apart from when they change roles, can you take away? Basically, what you say is we have some standard biz apart from the access that everybody has. Basically, what you say is we have some standard business access is added on access that everybody has. It's removed, and they allocated roles access is added on because it's a big security issue for a lot of allocated their new permissions. What people do in a manual provision process issue for a lot of companies, they will clone somebody. What people do in a manual provision process, they will clone. Often is they will clone somebody. If you're joining a particular team, they will clone. Sure the permissions and access that the person in the team has got, because we're not sure what they need. So that person in that team has got all the access, what they need. So that's that person in that team has got all the access horribly wrong. So that's one company I worked with horribly wrong. Which one company we were talking to, I worked with, the trigger for can you help us automate our employee onboarding and that we need to do it by job roles. The trigger for can you help us automate our employee onboarding, somebody joined their marketing we need to do it by job roles, and is because the employee recommended somebody joined their marketing department, cloning for the roles was one of their senior the employee recommended what nobody had allowed for is cloning for the roles. Lady in question senior marketing who was picked as nobody had allowed for is used to be lady administration team who was picked as the used to be the used to be in the administration assistant, and used to be so she still had the her CEO's personal assistant, personal assistant. So she still had so when they cloned all of her roles. All of these new starters suddenly had access to the CEO's mailbox thing. So when they cloned them, all of a sudden these new starters suddenly had access to the CEO's mailbox.
Find out.
Yes, yes. So the lady in question was quite senior. She was now head of marketing. So the lady in question was quite senior. She was now head of. She no longer looked at all of her mailbox, but she wasn't aware she'd still got access. She no longer looked at this person joined and mailbox, but lo and behold logged in and aware she'd still got access. But this person joined and they shouldn't have had. Lo and behold logged in and all of a sudden they've got roles-based permissions is one of the biggest things they shouldn't have had want to do. So roles-based with automation is it's very easy to do because the first thing you ask, and the point with automation will ask you to do is very easy to do. Onboarding an employee, you ask the automation will ask you to give them access to. Onboarding an employee. What is it you want to give them access to?
Isn't that part of the other misleading thing where a lot of these... Isn't that kind of part of the other misleading thing where a lot of these
automate your onboarding process,
different companies and things
the only thing they can help you do is create automate your onboarding process, but really the only thing they can help you do is create like an Active Directory account
basic, but it doesn't really
Microsoft
take the whole process of
account
or something basic, but it doesn't really
they're
take
still
into
spending
the
their first
whole
2 weeks
process
waiting
of
for
everything that
this person and that person to
would
figure
still
out how to
need, so they're
request
still
access. Spending their first 2 weeks waiting for
I think it
this
goes
person
beyond
and
that.
that person to
There
figure
are
out how to
companies
request access.
when people when companies think about employee onboarding, there are companies when people unless they ask companies think about employee onboarding, people assume is that their first thought is unless they it's about the basic identity provision. A lot of people assume can we create an Active Directory their first thought is it's about the basic identity provision. Mm-hmm. Can we create an Active Directory account? And even when you're working with people to Entra ID, most people are doing it. And even when you're working with linked it to an on-premise AD. Most people are doing it if you adding a user linked it to an on-premise ID, and then that user will get created and enter. Adding a user employee onboarding is a lot more complicated than just. And then that user will get created and enter. Can I create employee onboarding is a lot more complicated than just. Can I add a user to? Can I create? They go looking at Active Directory. A lot of service desks will say, "Oh, they support employee onboarding." When they go looking, a lot of service desks will say, "Oh, they support a bit of workflow that will trigger a task." What they actually to create an Active Directory to do is to maybe add a bit of workflow that will trigger a task to create. What it doesn't cover is all of the other pieces. Maybe add a I can add a user to a group. What it doesn't cover is all of the other pieces. Like I can add a user to a group, and that might even if I've done all of the background working and then create a Microsoft 365 that adding a user to a group might create an Entra ID and then create a logic that says if you put somebody in this AD group, then that drives other all of the logic that says if you put somebody in this AD group, then that drives things. other automation. You've got the time, the knowledge, and within Microsoft 365 to go very, very complicated. If you've got the time, but that just creates a user. You can get it to do that, but on-premise very complicated. And in Microsoft 365, it doesn't sort out. But that just creates a user. Does this user need Teams on-premise? And in Microsoft 365, it doesn't sort out things like does this user need Teams calling plan? They need Teams telephone
or any other voice over IP.
Or Teams calling plan and a Teams telephone number.
Or any other voice over IP.
Or you can't do by adding somebody into a group. But it doesn't. You might be able to allocate them a Teams and those sort of processes. You can't do by adding somebody into a group. You might be able to allocate them a Teams telephone number because you need calling plan or some other. But you're not going to be able to allocate a query and find out because you need to. What telephone numbers have got available? Other calling. Do you need to request a new telephone number? What telephone numbers are
integration becomes key?
Do I need to request a new
telephone number? Being able to talk to these
Isn't that where integration becomes key?
To interface with them on a whole other level than just,
being able to
Surface. To interface with them on a whole other level than just, Surface.
Yeah, companies have told me that is where they've tried to do employee onboarding before. Companies have told me that where they've tried to do employee onboarding because the tools that they've looked at have been very much come to vendor has because the tools that they've looked at have been very much the vendor has cherry picked for employee onboarding. Typically, we can create you an Active Directory account, or we can add some employee onboarding. Maybe they've gone typically with a password. We can create an identity management account, or we can applications groups, or maybe they've gone with a password more an identity management creating groups, adding user groups, and you can do more things around creating groups and adding allocation based on roles. Groups, and those tools typically require you to drive group through their own user interface based on roles. But some manual typically require you to drive them through their own user interface. But they haven't got integration manual to request from that all of the other tools. They do the identity of Active Directory and Entra. All of the other tools. What they don't do is they do the identity other bits of Active Directory 365 environment. What they don't do is cloud services access. So does this person need access to? But then cloud services access. So Amazon, does this person need access to Microsoft Azure services, or are they Amazon using or Salesforce? Microsoft Azure, are they developing using Salesforce? Are they a developer who needs access to? Are they developing Azure DevOps? Are they a developer who needs access to? Or projects in Atlassian and Jira? Azure DevOps, those things are not or projects in Atlassian and Jira. Windows Active Directory are not authenticated type apps, and allocation of emissions. Windows Active Directory authenticated type apps, and allocation user account creation or roles allocation processes. So it's within the APIs of those different user account creation or roles allocation to automate anything. The APIs of those different systems. So you need tools, a large number of systems to automate end-to-end. You need tools that can integrate, the flexibility to be able to integrate into a large number of systems, and not just that system, any systems, but the flexibility to be able to integrate into how you deploy
some of the biggest
that system.
Differences were onboarding usually has delays. Some of the biggest automation can differences kind of help override. Onboarding usually finds delays versus where automation can kind of help override.
The biggest
what do you find as the biggest key points in your experience?
The biggest ones that I see, so apart from the baton handling between different teams, issue of in the relay of onboarding the user, the baton handling, the number of times the baton gets dropped, and in the relay of onboarding a user, often the number of times the baton gets dropped. The main one we see is that which takes time. If you're doing things manually, a lot of the user interfaces is that. If you're doing things manually, a lot of the user interfaces changes that you've made take time or manually onboarding to actually reflect the changes, for example, Microsoft 365. So if you're manually onboarding somebody into, for example, Microsoft 365, for some bits, it's
how long are you watching the wheel spin in between?
You can create a user. It's not even how much you're watching the wheel spin. You can create a user maybe a minute in Microsoft 365, and the wheel spin does things in the background. Is probably you can add it to groups maybe a minute, and depending on how the UI is performing, you can add it to groups 2 or 3 minutes. Depending on how the UI is performing, to a that can take But if you're actually going to go on and do like a Teams, add a user to a set Teams provision. But if you're actually doing it through the UI, like you can assign somebody a Teams provision account. If you're doing it through the UI, if you can assign somebody a Teams calling, you need to then give them a phone system. If you want a phone to give them phone calling, you can do that. But then to actually go on a phone system account, assign a telephone number. You can do that. But then to actually go on and then so they can then assign a telephone receive incoming calls. Phone system account. There's a 24-hour delay. So they can make or receive incoming calls.
I used to joke around and say everything takes a minimum of 15 minutes that you do in the cloud. I used to joke around and say even though it says it's done, 15 minutes that you do in the cloud, for it to become effective, even though through the entire cloud system and be recognized by everything, it takes X amount of time. Go through the entire cloud system and be recognized by everything. Exactly. It takes the bit that's X amount of time.
The furthest behind all the updates is the UI.
Exactly.
Often the bit that's the least. What we find when we're automating all the updates, a lot of those challenges that I've just talked about. If you do them, what we find when we're automating the APIs, a lot of those challenges from an automated approach. If you do them automatic, the effect actually the APIs, so you're doing it from an automated approach. The effect because you're telling the tool happens that it's happened instantaneously.
Right.
Because you're telling often in that it's all of it replicating through before the UI is up to date. The delays are often now I know that all of it replicating through before the UI is up to date, and saying now I know the APIs go in and you can start the next piece. Create a user in Office in Microsoft 365. The APIs assign them a Teams. Create a user in account in Microsoft 365. Assign them a Teams calling plan, and then you can go back and immediately allocate them a calling plan. You get a calling plan ID back, and then you can go back and immediately ID. You can then go to the assign a Teams telephone number back. Because what it requires is you can then go to the telephone number. Assign a Teams telephone number. Yes, here's the ID of the telephone number. Requires is assign the telephone number to the calling plan ID. Is there a telephone number? Yes, here's the ID of the telephone number.
The other thing that I would imagine is this helps deal with some of the teams that are siloed and don't. The other thing that I would imagine is when they're kind of in their own little world and siloed and don't really kind of bypass some of with others and they're kind of in their own little world and
a lot of the systems out
kind of bypasses some of that, right?
Yes, absolutely, because a lot managed and administered by people that companies use are predominantly users of the platform. Managed and administered by people who are predominantly users of the platform. Part of your typical day-to-day IT part of your onboarding. Typical day-to-day the classic example is like something like Salesforce or another CRM system. The classic example is CRM admin, Salesforce or another CRM system is often somebody who understands the CRM system who may not be part of your IT team. Is often somebody who understands the CRM system who may not be part of your IT team. Or if it's a cloud service, nobody manages the platform at all. The platform, or if it's a cloud service, the CRM vendor. Nobody manages the platform at all. It's hosted by the CRM vendor.
Right.
So what you have you could well be talking to a non-CRM administrator, full-time IT person. So you could well be talking to a somebody in your sales team, full-time IT person, CRM administrator. Could be somebody in your sales team who is so they're not an CRM administrator. Normally in your IT stream, it could be an application owner. When you need to onboard a new user into that tool, you're now going to somebody stream who has no other. When you need to onboard a new user into that tool, you're now going to somebody provision on a day-to-day basis who has no other dealings with IT. When you're onboarding somebody who needs access to provision on a day-to-day basis, apart from it's when just you're onboarding somebody who needs access to their tool that they pick up. When they've got time just and interest, a side part of their role stuck that they pick up,
and you still have
when
to track
they've got
that
time
person
and interest to do
down,
it, which is where it gets stuck.
It's not usually an entire team that's dedicated to it. You still have to track that person
down.
One person, if you're lucky, there's a backup person. Usually an entire team that's dedicated they're on vacation for the next week. One person, if you're lucky, there's a backup person.
Yes, exactly.
And they're like, they're on vacation for the next week.
You have
to wait till they come back,
as you say. Yes, exactly. So it's not for a lot of systems that is easily accessible by admins, as you say, or would be not accessible by all, because often they're accessible by all. So not everybody's got access because often they're licensed onboarding and the like. And the challenge with those tools particularly is for what happens onboarding and somebody. The like. And the challenge with those tools because you've now got a whole disparate team of people.
Right.
Because you've now got a whole disparate team part of the process. People
and they all have to have permissions
who you need to
do
rely
this.
on to do their part of the process.
All of these functions, and they all have to have permissions to do them access to particular things. All of these functions, regions and whatnot. Add users and give them access to particular things. Can also be difficult to control because how many people are given global admin can also be difficult to control because Microsoft Azure. How many people are given global admin so that's got to be another point Microsoft Azure. All right. Where can we control this? So that's got to be another point. Keep it from getting too far. Where can we control this? And how
one
can
of the things I see a lot is
keep it
that
from
companies go, well,
getting too far.
When looking at automation,
one of the things I see a lot
are we sure that we want the automation to have admin rights? When looking at automation user or do something else, are we sure that we want the automation to have admin rights to be able to create automation user or do something else? The system. Well, it could be abused. You could abuse, but it has a full audit trail. Automation could be used to abuse the system. What happened? Well, it could be abused. But it has a full audit trail. About how many global admins in Active Directory have you currently got, or Enter ID, and then they run it. How many global admins in Active Directory have you currently got, or Enter ID, and then they run it, and they suddenly find 35 that they thought they had. And they look at it and go, why have I got 30? And they've actually got these people needed it at one point.
Right.
And when they look at it, go, why have I got 30? So they were given these people. They were needed it at one point because they were doing a project or doing something else. So they were given. They were given. They used to work admin rights because second line they were doing a project or doing something else. Working projects and others, and their access has never been removed. Second line of support.
Right.
So your security working projects and others, and their access has never been removed. We've got loads of security. Loads of people who've got often are. We've got more people who've got admin rights than we expected. Who've got because they've just inherited and used them. We've got more people who've got admin rights than we expected because they've just inherited. Typically deal with the employee onboarding requests, which are the first line people who are running a process. Deal with the employee onboarding. They're not the people who've got admin, which are the first line people who are running a process. They're not the people who've got admin access. Who are your level of dealing with an employee onboarding or level 2 techs are perfectly capable of dealing with an employee onboarding. You don't want to trust them with the task list, Crown, which is admin access. But they're not given because so it's level 3s and level 4s who've got admin Crown, which is admin access. So you're actually using so it's level 3s and highest skilled, most experienced resources. So you're actually using your probably one of the most skilled, most experienced resources in IT to do onboard a new user or mind-numbing tasks. And if anybody's busy, onboard a new user, can easily get distracted and not do something. And if anybody's busy, it's a level 4 tech and can easily get distracted and not do something.
Gets us in trouble sometimes, doesn't it?
It's a level 4 tech. Absolutely. Well, classic case.
That gets us in trouble sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Well, classic case. They wanted that I did one of their issues for the quite a few years ago now. Employee onboarding wasn't what triggered it. It was employee offboarding. One of their issues for the whole reason they had employee onboarding wasn't what triggered it. Was employee offboarding. Somebody they knew, trusted quite well, but they had an IT contractor for a period. Somebody they knew, trusted quite well, but he'd been with them for a period and left the business. The engagement he was on ended. Left the business. 6 months later, left the business. There was a new project. Perfect. Left the business. The company 6 months later. There was a new project, and he walked in the door on Monday morning. The company sat down and logged in with the same username and password as he'd had 6 months before. And he walked in the door on Monday morning, sat down and logged in with the same username and password as he'd had 6 months before.
That had to be alarming.
Yep, the account hadn't been suspended, it hadn't been terminated.
That so had to be alarming.
Nobody had done anything with it. The account had just been suspended, it had left, terminated. It should have gone. Nobody had done anything with it. It had just been, but it had left. It should have gone. It had gone on the list because, and it never been done visible because if you're onboarding a user, there is somebody sat at the desk going, "I can't do anything." If you're onboarding, give me some access. There is somebody sat at the desk going, "I can't do anything." Nobody, give me some access. Nobody's shouting about when somebody leaves, they've still got access. Nobody's shouting about the fact that they've still got access.
Right. So if we think about this whole process, right?
Wow.
Yep. And we talk about how the whole flow would work. This whole process, let's take it from start to finish. So you've got somebody that gets hired. How the whole flow would work. What can be automated? Let's take it typically from start to finish. So you've got somebody that gets hired. Same thing with whether what can be automated. Roles in between. They get promoted. And maybe ultimately they leave the company, their contract ends, whatever. They get promoted. What's the whole process? Maybe ultimately they leave the company, their contract ends, whatever. Are there sticking points that say this works better or this doesn't? Or are there sticking points that say this works better or this doesn't? Or is it
what we find in the process is that about 80%. So of what we find in the process is that about 80%. So an employee what onboarding we can do is we create users, automated, adding users to groups. What we can do is we Microsoft 365 users, cloud users provisions, groups, cloud services accounts Microsoft creation, 365 roles-based provisions in cloud there. Provisions, the cloud services accounts creation can't roles-based permissions in there from an employee on. We can even do companies VPN access and virtual desktop provisions. If from an employee, we can even do bits that are VPN access and virtual desktop provisions. Typically, the provision of a laptop. The bits that are not fully automated is PC compute infrastructure for the provision of a employee. Is not automated because most PC compute infrastructure for the new employee is not automated because most companies automated build process for a laptop provisions. Automated build process for
huge enterprise organization that says this is the model that we order from huge enterprise organization that says custom image, that's a different story, but we order a lot of them at X vendor with this image or custom image, that's a different story, but a lot of them are at that level.
Where there is a room. I've been into full of banking organizations.
Yep.
Being where provision. There is a room. And when you need one for that particular customer, laptops, they're doing onboarding provision. You literally need one put a request for that particular customer. We're doing the laptop. They did onboarding. You literally to say put a request. We need one of these laptop for this role delivered on this desk on this date. We need one of these. For this role,
can be automated,
delivered on this desk on this ticket date. Request got automated. Yes, so we automated the whole ticket request.
Can be automated.
And the ticket request got automated. Yes, so we automated the whole ticket process. And there was a human who shuffled the laptop driving to the right place. Their build process. For other companies, and it's then shuffled the laptop to the right place just in time. IT for other companies, it's a build process. Just in time for those customers, IT procurement, you can't build process because often they don't have an integrated mechanism for ordering automate because often they don't have so it's integrated. It's a request mechanism for ordering new the IT procurement team. So we can automate the request into request team. The IT procurement you have to pick that up and manually automate the creation into the IT get request team. From store and manually go and order a laptop on spec. Get one, and the other one that from store and is build with your cell phone on spec. And the other one, so if you're providing company cell phone, is your cell phone. That is more of an issue because so if you're providing company cell phones, that is more of an issue because most companies don't have their cell provider. You have to contact the cell provider. Now, with their cell provider that I work with, you have to request into the cell provider is now via email. Now, for a lot of companies that I've worked with the account in a standard form, the account is now via email. Automating that by they buy from in a standard form T-Mobile. So we're actually automating that by they buy from Sprint an email with your account details on. Or Sprint and ask them and you send Sprint an email with your account details on of type A, and ask them to ship a brand new user at this location of type A, to
so all depends on their preference.
This user at this location,
Apple, whatever.
Yep. But yes,
all depends on their preference. Android,
Apple,
in
that manner. Yep. I have worked with companies who've got fully bonded. Interfaces as well. So I have worked with companies who've got full bonded UK interfaces as well. So working with one of the UK, I worked with providers UK company who were working with their provider Vodafone. Had a provider's e-gateway. Their provider Vodafone logged into the e-gateway and submitted a request to purchase. That and that is logged into the e-gateway and submitted a request to purchase. Automate the population of that web page. So we were able to automate the population of that web page. The vendor literally just order mobile phone went in. Vodafone so boxed the vendor literally just request went in. Vodafone just.
So one of the things that we were talking about a little bit ago that I think we still need to go and one of the things that we were talking about a little is the whole concept of role-based onboarding and kind of emphasize more is the whole concept of role-based onboarding, kind of break it down benefits so that people can start to understand how that breaking it down template so that people can start to understand automation, how that kind of template attitude
what we're talking about roles-based
in automation, especially.
IT teams and the business. What we're talking about roles-based is if somebody is going to join the sales department, sitting down and going, right, if somebody is going to join the sales department, do they need access to? So they're going to need a user account, they're going to need an email address. Systems do they need access to? Is there a sales they're going to need a user account, they're going to need an email address. Is there a SharePoint site they need access to? Are they supposed to be part of a particular Slack channel? Is there a SharePoint site they need access to? Is there a CRM Are they supposed to be part of a particular Slack channel? If they're in sales, is there a CRM tool that what role are they going to have? Because in the CRM, that might if they're in sales, you have missions to do different things or see different territories. Because in the CRM, that might mean that you have to sit down and look at for different things or see different territories. What IT infrastructure should sit down and look services at should they have access to this role? And you what IT infrastructure should so if you were services should they have access to? You'd obviously have an account and an email address. Team. So you would have different marketing teams or SharePoint sites. You'd obviously have an account and an email address. You would probably have access to the CRM teams or SharePoint sites only to be able to see. What you would probably have access to the CRM got, but not be able to be able to create them or change the details or manage the process. Companies that we've got, looking at how well be able to create to our change the details sales activity process. You're looking at how well with our marketing and then relating to our an IT role, sales activities. Then you would have different and then if different access depending on the type role within IT would define. Then you would have different tools. You've got access. You basically build up a matrix of would define. If you're in this job role, if you're going to basically build up this job matrix of going in this department, if you're in this job role, if you're going to be employed to do this job in this company, in this department, you need access to
these are the standards. So
it becomes the tick list of what
these are the standards.
And then anything outside of that, so it becomes the tick list request what you get. Because it's an anomaly. And then anything outside you need something extra that most people don't. Has to be a separate request.
Or you've got like an optional section on your request.
You need something extra that most people don't.
Or you've got like an optional section on your request.
You're in all of these for this role. You have all of this access. So when you come to you're in all of these for this role, you have all of this access. So when you come to sales change, and you're now going to go into the marketing. So you were in sales, for example, and you're now going to go into the sales role,
right?
For example, or you keep the standard company things, sales role, telephone number. But what we go is we go right. Keep the standard company go and find you, email address, telephone and remove all of your roles. But what we go is we go right. We are going to go and find you, and then we're going all of your roles that you had as part of sales. The systems access that you now need for marketing, and then we're going to re-provide you. And in fact, systems access that you now need for marketing when you're doing job roles is you go rather than going what is your current role. And in fact, what we do should you have access to when you're doing job roles is you go rather than going what is your current role and employee offboarding role, which is it goes remove. I can check the automation systems you've told me to monitor. Employee offboarding role, which is it goes. So it goes if you're changing roles. I'm just going to assume you've told me to go through everything. So it goes if you're changing roles. Everywhere you're not supposed to be. I'm going to go through for a basic employee. And remove you from everywhere you're not supposed to be everywhere you're supposed to be for your basic employee. So and then I'll go back and add you to everywhere you're supposed to be for your new role. Marketing stuff and a person in sales. So you know that a person in marketing only have access to marketing stuff and a person in sales only has access to sales. Development. If you change from and you change between different development projects, your access to the team, application and development, and you change roles between different development projects. Your access to the application development to the roles that you had before, roles that you should have disappear. And you now have the access to the new projects and roles. Security. It's basically about making sure that the people who should have access to these things. It's basically about only making sure have access to them. The people who should have access to these things, you don't have it. Only those people have access to them.
And the same thing when they leave the company altogether. You don't have it. Let's go and make sure that. And the same thing when they leave the company altogether.
Doesn't get bored.
Let's go and make sure that.
You don't ask it to you go things that you know automation that doesn't get bored. You say go find them. So you don't ask it to remove the things that you know and just see if they exist. You say go find them. If they do exist, everywhere, take them out. If they don't exist, and just see if they exist. If they do exist, take them out. If there's anything that's been provisioned outside of the standard process, which has not been documented, and then if there's anything that's been provisioned, you take it away as well. Outside of the standard process, which has not been documented. But from an automated offboarding, the key thing you can do is, right, this person is leaving on this date. But from an automated offboarding, when the key thing you can do is, right, so we kick the offboarding this person is leaving on this day. When do you kick in the final day? So we kick the offboarding in on the midday, and at 5 o'clock on the final day, the automation goes, right, 5 o'clock offboarding on the final day. I am going to disable your login on the final day. The automation goes, force a log out of all of the systems. I am going to disable your login. Potentially could be logged in. I am going to force a log out of all of the systems. Force a log out where you potentially could be logged in. So Microsoft instantly force a log out of your Microsoft within 5 365 system. Disabling their user account, so you know they no longer have access to your corporate Microsoft 365 on any system. They no longer have access. They may have had the account on your corporate Microsoft 365 because one's on any system. Yep, that's it. Because they may have had the account force a log out.
Personal cell phones or any of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. If you don't force a log out for that disablement, it can take up to 24 hours. It is quite normal for even that disablement ripples through all the process done. It is quite normal, effectively by a human being, that if you've not gone through and done those sort of checks, effectively by still have access to their email boxes. If you've not gone through and done those sort of checks, people still have access to their email boxes 24 hours after they've left the business. So it's that, and that's the point with the automation is it doesn't get bored. Yeah. So you give it a list. If there's 100 things to do, it will do all 100 of them. Doesn't get bored.
Right.
So you give it a list. If there's 100 things to do, it will do all 100 of them. Probably do all 100 of them in about 5 minutes and doesn't care.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say next. So we sit here and we talk about all of this. Okay, so we know how the process works. So that's what I was going to say next. So we sit here and we talk about all of this. The biggest benefits, how the process works. We kind of know number one what it's doing. You're limiting the biggest benefits need to have the permission to do all of these things. You're limiting the people's need to have controlling permission security to do all of these things. But the biggest point is probably controlling that security level on one side. And by doing the biggest point is probably just the amount of time that's saved.
The whole security improvements that you make
that way.
About your offboarding. Absolutely. And the whole security it does sound a big thing that you're doing about your offboarding, but it doesn't take a long time to do. It does sound a big thing that you're doing. Automated onboarding. It doesn't take a long time to do. When we say automated, we're talking about using a proper tool. Automated an automation platform, which is when we say automated, we're talking about using a proper integration capabilities, because that's an automation platform which has got lots of things. So you need to integrate lots of things, because that's the thing. If you're going to do it properly, you need to touch lots of things. They are. So you need to be able to integrate in your business, and you need to be able to integrate them using a point connector from a service desk that's deployed in your business, or possibly. So it's not using a point connector from a service desk that's a niche that's focused on identity management around Active Directory or Entra, stuff like that. You're looking at something that's focused on a broad reach of integration capabilities, Entra, stuff like that. You're looking at something that's got a broad reach of integration capabilities. 4 or 5 weeks to have that. But when we've done those sort of processes, we're looking at 4 or 5 weeks to have that probably up and running. The majority of that 4 or 5 weeks is actually what do you want it to do? The majority of that
because people haven't done it before, so they don't know
what do you want it to
what it can do, and then they're saying, because people haven't done it before, so they don't know, of course, what it can do, and then they're saying, the more they find out what it can do, or that, and
yes, absolutely,
of course, that list gets longer the more they find out what it can do.
I think this is a good place to stop for today.
Absolutely.
This will be an ongoing series about how to automate your onboarding and offboarding employee processes. This will be an ongoing series about how to automate your onboarding and offboarding employee processes. So stay tuned for more to come.
Thank you for joining us at Calvarian Talks. If you're interested in IT automation or want more information on how we can help you, remember, if you're interested in IT automation or want more information on how we can help you, remember, or on our website via email at info. If you like what we're doing here, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Calvarian.com. If you like what we're doing here, please like, share, comment, and subscribe.